other guests? Okay, I think that's it. All right, well, we're going to start off with a Rotary Minute from Dave Erickson, who you'll be able to hear but not see. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm waving. Hello, everybody. I am fully clothed and decent. My Rotary Minute is going to be on Rotary International's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I must admit that I thought that all that meant was that we were going to allow Yankee fans into the club, but I guess there's more to it. So this is out of the Rotary International website, and it just says that we believe that exemplifying and embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, should be a part of everything that we do at Rotary. To ensure to live up to that ideal, the board of directors of our DEI task force acted to strengthen the DEI statement originally adopted in 2019. The result is in a new commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here it is. At Rotary, we understand that cultivating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture is essential to realizing our vision of a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change. We value diversity and celebrate the contributions of people of all backgrounds across age, ethnicity, race, color, disability, learning style, religion, faith, socioeconomic status, culture, marital status, languages spoken, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity, as well as differences in ideas, thoughts, and values and beliefs. Recognizing that individuals from certain groups have historically experienced barriers to membership, participation, and leadership, we commit to advancing equity in all aspects of Rotary, including in our community partnerships, so that each person has a necessary access to resources, opportunities, networks, and support to thrive. We believe that all people hold visible and invisible qualities that inherently make them unique. We strive to create an inclusive culture where each person knows they are valued and belong. In line with our value of integrity, we are committed to being honest and transparent about where we are in our DEI journey as an organization and to continuing to learn and do better.
All right, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, and now it's time for our inspiration from Sally.
So many of you know that I'm very involved in the Williston Food Shelf, and I, over my many years, there have been many people who have inspired me. One of them is Sarah Miles. Sarah Miles has written 3 books. This one's called Take This Bread. She's a lesbian woman in San Francisco who was an atheist, became an Episcopalian, and convinced her Episcopal church to allow her to have a food shelf in the sanctuary of the church. So every Friday, they open up the church to what sounds like hundreds of people. I don't actually know how many, but it's a very, very busy food shelf. And I know Chris, where are you, Chris? Chris has worked there when we have customers, and she knows a lot about the diversity that we encounter in our food shelf. Having said that, we're all human, and we're not angels. We make mistakes, we judge, possibly do things we shouldn't do, but we love the work and it's very rewarding. So I'm going to read you a little bit from Sarah's book. I'll start out by saying one thing that she said, who aren't like me. So this is a little excerpt from an episode at her food shelf. It was like the time I'd been trying to open the pantry while an impatient throng shouted at me and one another in 3 languages. Mind you, she's in San Francisco. one night we had 5 languages, so we're not that far removed. I'd been unloading crates of oranges as fast as I could and bossing the volunteers relentlessly, but we were still behind schedule. I hated everyone. The rice needed to be bagged and a pallet of cereal was still not unpacked. There were a dozen cupcakes on the altar, the remains of the volunteers' lunch, and frosting was smeared on the altar cloth. Teddy was nipping worriedly at the heels of the stragglers, ducking into the kitchen obsessively to ask me questions and checklists. Ernesto's back, said Michael quietly as he walked past me. I looked up. A heavily tattooed Chicano man with huge prison muscles was sauntering in toward the bathroom. Sarah, he greeted me. What's up? Hey, Ernesto, I said wearily. How have you been? Oh, it was rough, Ernesto said, his eyes darting around. I had to keep a razor blade under my tongue, to protect myself. Can I have one of those cupcakes? I handed him a cupcake from the plate on the altar. Yeah, Ernesto said, I thought of you. Every Friday I prayed for you. Can I get my groceries now instead of waiting? Gotta wait, I said. Just like everyone else, wait until we're set up. Ernesto took his cupcake outside sulkily. I followed him. On the sidewalk in front of the church, the crowd was gathering. 2 old Cuban sisters who always showed up hours early were bickering with each other noisily. 3 little kids ran over and started pestering me for candy, and the crazy guy with apocalyptic theories cornered me, wanting to explain the secret messages he'd received. It's the end days, he said urgently. I could see over my shoulder that a visitor was waiting in the doorway, but I couldn't get a minute to talk to him. New volunteers were hovering, asking me what to do, but nothing was getting done. Everything felt hectic and irritating, and my feet were sore. I was sick of poor people, sick of church people, utterly sick of myself. And then a woman had pushed her way to the front of the crowd. She was Chinese, wearing a quilted jacket, and she was thrusting a package at me. I couldn't understand what she was trying to say, but she kept smiling and coming closer. Here, she said, and handed me a piece of fish wrapped in wax paper, still warm. Food for you.
All right, just a few quick announcements and then we will get to our speaker. First off, I have a nice thank you note to read from Cathedral Square. Dear Williston Rotary Club members, we cannot thank you enough for coming to memory care at Allen Brook and removing some of the overgrown gardens. We know it was backbreaking work and took longer than expected, but it looks so good and will provide our residents more space to play lawn games or just sit and enjoy. Thank you so much. And that's from Kim Fitzgerald, the CEO at Cathedral Square. So thanks to those of you who participated in that effort. Sherry had a couple notes about Monday. Be sure to wear your Rotary garb and
remember, I'll send one last email out. Sorry, guys, the emails are crazy, but if you're working the morning shift, there was a map on where we would be meeting. I'm not sure how clear that was. I'll resend that. And then if you're coming in on a split shift, so you're coming in for the later, you were paired up with somebody. So somebody's working 10, 11, 12, 10 to 1, and then you're working from 1 to 4. Just text, get the email for whoever you're split up with, and then ask them where to go, because it sounds like you're going to be scattered. So you'll want to just get in direct contact with whoever you're paired up with to find out where you will be. Dress for the weather. Sounds like the most important thing is comfortable shoes. I have the vests that we can hand out later. It looks like there's a lot of really large ones, but they'll also have vests. But still, if you have a Rotary shirt, Rotary hat, we're allowed to do that. Marty, you had a question?
Okay, we won't know before the day.
We won't know until that morning. We're asked to get there at least like 10 minutes ahead of time. And then they'll tell us where to go. He said it's a pretty quiet Monday is really pretty quiet. So I don't think we're gonna feel frazzled or anything. We should be good. And any other questions, just throw me I'll email everybody with my phone number too, in case you want to text, because texting might be a lot easier
Mhm.
than emails.
I need to come in for the second part of the shift, so Armand could use a partner for the early start, if anybody is available.
And spouses or friends can help us too. Just they'd be doing a great job just helping us earn money. That'd be awesome.
Thank you, Doug.
Cool. All right.
Did we stick to just the early shift?
Yes. It was gonna be way too much to try to get. If you do want to volunteer on any given night, so you're not able to do a morning shift, but you are interested in doing a shift, you can team up with some other group, because a lot of groups don't have 12 or 15 people. So if you're interested in that though, let me know, and then we can still get the $100 per person. You just wouldn't be working with Rotary at the time. Might join up with another group and you'd still get paid. Rotary would still get paid. So.
Sounds
let me
good.
know and I can give you Sean's information.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. And then we'll also be having a fundraising committee meeting right after this meeting here, kind of a stand-up quick meeting that Sherry's gonna lead.
Real quick.
All right. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to remind folks, if you have a thank you note that you wrote to someone in the Williston Fire Department and you hadn't yet brought it, please leave it on the table over there. And I'll make sure that it gets to Andy for when we give the big delivery. Okay, all right. I'll turn it over to Ted now.
Good morning. So our speaker today is Leslie Black-Plumeau. I've known Leslie for 20 years. We met at a group that doesn't exist anymore, but it was Families with Children from China. Leslie and her husband, Peter, have a daughter from China, Kaylee, who is my daughter Ella's one of her best friends. And it started there, and it was a wonderful group because everybody's family looked like everybody else's family. And I found that to be important. Leslie works for the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. She's a research and community relations manager, and she's done policy and planning work before that. We're going to be hearing today about housing in Williston. It's critically important, and if I may, just 30 seconds. One of my best classes in law school was actually civil procedure, the rules, interpleader, cross motions, answers and complaints, and things like that. It was incredibly dry stuff, but I'm an incredibly dry person. But one of the thing that I found about it that I actually enjoyed so much was that the rules, the nuts and bolts of the system, determined whether somebody could get into court and seek justice. And it was that simple. If you missed a deadline, you were out. If you didn't plead something correctly, you might be able to correct it, but maybe not. And the nuts and bolts of a system are just so critically important because people can get caught up in it if they're not done properly. My experience on the select board has shown that is completely true in every area of government, not just courts, but municipal government and everything else, that the people can get caught up in the nuts and bolts. And with our housing situation in Vermont right now, good intentions and wonderful ideas are fine, but it really does come down to the nuts and bolts. And so Leslie is going to give us a presentation today about the housing situation in Vermont. And unfortunately, we're not going to have she had a visual presentation, I think maybe a laser show. Yeah, but the tech has failed us this morning. But anyway, without further ado, Leslie Black-Plumeau.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here this morning and to start your day with some thinking about Vermont's housing issues I'm happy to share this, this short slideshow with anybody if they want to just let me know what your email address is. I'll send it your way. But it's not a problem. We can definitely talk about these issues. And you've heard a lot about Vermont housing over the last year in particular, because we are in a tight situation right now. And in many places, we're kind of thinking about it as a housing triple-demic, because we had a housing shortage in Vermont that was brewing over the last decade. We really had a growing disparity between income and what it costs to live in Vermont, what it costs to buy a house and pay the mortgage, and what it costs to rent a house. And so we already had, through the last decade, a problem brewing with housing affordability and housing availability. But then on top of that, we had the pandemic in 2020, which introduced a number of things for our housing market. One was, actually, surprisingly, we had more people who wanted to live here year round than we had in the past. And we were expecting kind of stagnant population growth in Vermont prior to the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, we suddenly had people here that hadn't been here prior, not a lot more, but some more. And what that did was it taxed our already pretty tight housing supply. So we had increased demand to live here year round and very tight supply of available homes. So it put some extra pressure on our housing market, in addition to some other things like raising the cost of materials, and we had some reduced supply of home builders and home renovators. And so that's those different market forces of the pandemic was the second aspect of our triple-demic in housing in Vermont. The third was just recently, we had floods this summer in a number of communities in Vermont that have damaged, like, I guess the estimate that I've seen most recently is about 4,000 homes, and at least 700 of those are completely destroyed. And so the people that lived in those homes are looking for places to live. And we already have a really tight housing market and prices are really high. So they're getting some assistance, hopefully from FEMA and from the state, to pay for some temporary housing, but we don't really have much. So fortunately, I read this morning that FEMA is going to bring in some temporary housing, which in this is exactly what we need, because we don't have available apartments right now in Vermont for the most part. So that's our triple-demic of Vermont's housing situation right now. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's playing out here in the state, and then a little bit about your community, because you all know a lot about what's going on in Williston. And we can talk about that. But as I mentioned, we have really few homes for rent right now. We have historically low rental vacancy rate in Vermont. Last year it was the lowest in the country. This year it's the third lowest. And in Chittenden County, it's even lower. So statewide, we have about a 2% vacancy rate. 5 to 7% is considered healthy for a market. So we're statewide at about 2%. In Chittenden County, it's less than 1%. So that means the odds of tuning in and finding an apartment for rent in a community that you're looking to move to, or that you need to move into, is very low. We also have few homes for sale. We have historically low days on market. That's a metric that we look at to see how our homes for sale inventory is meeting demand. So it's never been this low. Right now, the median days on market for a home for sale in Vermont is about 56 days. And that's from the day it gets listed to the day it's sold. So it's just really not available for very long at all. And that creates a lot of pressure on the market. What both of those things do, the short supply of renter housing and the short supply of owner housing, it pushes up the price. So now we have even more of a gap between the cost of housing in Vermont and what our household incomes are. I am gonna show this one graph just because the bottom line is the change in our household income since 2000. And the upper two lines are the change in rents and the change in median purchase prices. So you can see that the disparity continues to grow between what we can afford to pay based on our median incomes and what the cost of housing is in terms of median prices and median rents. So that's so housing unaffordability is a huge problem in Vermont, and we also have increasing homelessness. We've never counted this many homeless in Vermont before. It is now up to well over 3,000 Vermonters experiencing homelessness when we counted in January of 2023. And again, that's higher than we have ever had before. So those are the ways this Vermont triple-demic housing experience is playing out statewide. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Williston too, because you all had a housing needs assessment done last year, and you've had a team of experts working on this between the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission and your own planning department. I think Melinda is on the line. She was very involved in this, and my agency helped support this housing needs assessment. But we looked at the data for Williston to try to determine what were the biggest needs here in terms of housing. And the report identified, I think it was 8 big picture conclusions about the housing needs in Williston. I'm going to tell you about 2 of those today for the sake of time. And then we'll talk a little bit about the opportunities that the report identified for Williston. But the top 2 findings about Williston's housing needs, the first one is that Williston lacks enough homes for the number of jobs that it has here. There's a metric called the jobs to homes ratio. So I'm going to hold up this map because I think it's kind of telling. There's a red circle around Williston. And it's yellow because it has the 3rd highest jobs to homes ratio in the state. And that means that the number of jobs here far outnumbers the number of homes here. So even if a worker could afford the price of the home here, they're outnumbered. There are 3 jobs here for every home that's located here. The reason this is important is because it's ideal for workers to be able to live near their jobs. They don't have to drive as far. It's better for the climate. It's better for everybody because people get to spend less time traveling and more time with their families and at their work. So Williston's got that housing need overarching, and it kind of encompasses a lot of the others. The only other 2 towns in the state of Vermont that have higher jobs to homes ratios right now are Berlin, which you can probably picture the medical center there. It's got a pretty small housing stock, and Killington. Killington's situation is probably more due to the nature of the homes being, most of those homes are vacation homes, not year-round homes, which the people that there are a lot of jobs in Killington. They may also be seasonal. So that one's got a little bit of a story to it. But Williston's actually, you all are mostly a year-round community, and you got a lot of jobs here. And so you have a lot of opportunity to create more opportunities for your workers to live here. And like that graph, that line graph that I showed you, where the household income was increasing at a much slower pace than the price of homes in Vermont, either for rent or for sale, Williston has experienced the same thing. The price of homes here, both home prices and median rents, has been increasing at an annual rate of about 5%. And household income has been increasing only at a rate of 2%, the median household income, and median wages increasing at about 3%. So the orange bars are our income and wages, and the blue bars are the housing costs in Williston on an annual basis over the past 10 years. So those were 2 of the findings from this housing needs assessment that was done for Williston last year. But the report also identified 7 opportunities for the community to address these needs. And I'm going to read them out loud because they're all important. And I want to leave you with the hope that there are ways to address some of the biggest challenges here in Williston and in Vermont as a whole. But here are the opportunities that the housing needs assessment included. Update growth management policy, number 1. Number 2, zoning reform. Number 3, sewer capacity and allocation. Number 4, activate the town's housing trust fund. Number 5, partner with nonprofits and other developers. You just mentioned Cathedral Square, and they're a great partner in terms of housing, creating affordable housing in Williston. Number 6, reduce the costs of housing construction. The town's levers for that are things like the cost of permitting and some of the other fees associated with building and the time that it takes to move through the process. Number 7, find creative ways to reduce residents' costs of living. Some of those costs are things like utility expenses. There are some levers the town can pull that can address that issue. So I am excited about the opportunities for Vermont and for Williston to address these housing needs, and really happy to be here this morning. And wanted to let you know that there's a lot more information out there if you're ever interested in just taking a peek at some of the information about Williston. Like I said, you have a report on the housing needs assessment, and that's on your town's website, and I'm happy to share the link to that. We also run a Vermont housing data website, which has all kinds of data about every community in the state. And that's just at housingdata.org, really easy to find. And then we write some articles about statewide housing needs and other issues affecting housing. And that's just at VHFA.org/news. But I'm happy to answer questions. I can try. Now they see how many there are. You guys are tough. Okay.
Leslie mentioned activate the housing trust fund in Williston. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I might have to refer to the experts on that, but I understand you have a housing trust fund in Williston.
$50,000 in it.
Yeah, so there were some steps that the folks who worked on the housing needs assessment identified just to get that. I don't believe that much is happening with it yet. At least when this assessment was done, not much was happening with it, but it would be good to put some specificity to that housing trust fund. Like, what are the goals? What do you want to do with it? How are you going to refund it? Keep it going over time? What revenue source would be used to fund it?
And people probably know that the town is setting up a housing committee, right? The select board members can confirm that. So and Melinda is going to be the staff person relating to that.
Great. So that's like,
yeah,
this is perfect to hand the housing committee some of this report and ask them to start moving forward with some of these recommendations. Yeah.
So it's my understanding there was some kind of tax credit added to the like availability for Vermont state tax credits to encourage people to rent out spare rooms they have in the past year. Is there any data on that yet, or is it too early to see how many taxpayers are going to take advantage of it? I think it was like $500 just to like encourage people who maybe have a 5-bedroom house and then they're just living alone or with their partner or empty nesters to rent out rooms, because I know a lot of the housing we do have here locally are larger houses and the folks living in them aren't necessarily big rambunctious families like they were maybe 40 years ago.
Yeah, I have one of those houses. I hadn't heard about that. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I read about it. I think it was part of Governor Scott's budget.
Yeah.
I don't think that passed.
I don't know whether it made it through, but it's a neat idea. There's definitely some untapped capacity in our large homes that many of us are living in.
It's my opinion that when we take low income families and we put them in rental housing, we have trapped them in poverty forever. Rents increase with the cost of living, salaries increase slower than the cost of living, and they have no opportunity to build up equity. Home ownership, on the other hand, the payments remain relatively stable throughout the life of a mortgage, and the family develops equity. Is there an ideal ratio between low-cost rental housing and low-cost home ownership housing? No. Okay. It's a good answer.
like how many of each should be in the community?
Yeah, if, when the town is looking at trying to get low-cost housing in town,
Mhm.
should there be some effort to have a ratio between rental and low cost? What I see today in town, so we tell people they need to build low-cost housing, and they build 50 $500,000 homes and put in a flat top apartment house and say that's our low-cost housing.
Mhm.
There's zero home ownership, but there's one Habitat for Humanity house in Williston.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, striving for like a variety of housing opportunities is ideal. And so if you look at Williston and you don't see the homeownership market, and this is true statewide, there are very few opportunities to buy a home that is priced at what could be affordable to someone at low or even middle income right now. There's just not much out there. So there are some efforts to try to increase the stock of homes that are affordable at lower price points, but they're pretty small. There's a statewide program that my agency, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, is running, and it was funded by the legislature and the governor's budget last year, called the Missing Middle Homeownership Development Program. So that's going to support the addition of some units that are affordable for buyers at lower incomes. We also use the state housing tax credit, which is kind of a complicated financial tool, to create some affordable owner opportunities, but they're just not very many. So some towns have also done things like put inclusionary zoning into their land development regulations. What that does is require that the way I've seen it done most commonly in Vermont is inclusionary zoning will require that any new development must include a certain percentage of homes that are affordable at a certain income level. And some of them are pretty explicit about, not about like if the bulk of the development is owner occupied homes, then the inclusionary units must also be owner occupied homes. So I think that's one way that people are trying to get at what you're describing.
I did see an advertisement yesterday for the latest Habitat for Humanity duplex just starting. That the price was set at $120,000 per unit. So
Yeah, that's great. They're amazing.
It's such a tiny amount.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. Yeah.
So I just have a positive comment. And admittedly, it's just a drop in the ocean, but you all may know that Champlain Housing Trust purchased the town suites and renovated it to Zephyr Place. And we see many of the occupants of Zephyr Place at the food shelf. We just did a survey. We had an open-ended space for comment at the end of that survey, and there were two people who similarly said that they had gone from homelessness to living at Zephyr Place, and that they were looking forward to being able to get back on their feet and get jobs. There are some things going on that hopefully will be helpful.
that were permitted in Chittenden County, most of the homes, basically most of the homes that were permitted in Chittenden County last year are in multi-unit buildings. So that means, so not just rental housing, but that also means that most of the new homes that are coming down the pike are not going to be single family standalone houses. They're going to be units in multi-unit buildings, both condos and apartments. And so I'm hopeful that we'll see more variety of condo options.
Thank you for this information. I noticed the FEMA news last night. How long, it's temporary housing units they bring into the state.
Yeah.
How long can they be here and where are they put?
It's a good question. I'm not
The
sure.
news said 18 months today.
18 months? Okay. But they're put, I mean, I'm just wondering, where's the land that these units are all going to go on?
It's a good question.
I would think they're not going to put them in the flood zone places where the houses are being torn down. So I wonder where they're going to be.
It's a great question. I imagine they try to keep people in the community, that they're, you know, that when you've got kids in school, you want to try to keep some continuity there. But I imagine they'll have to find, I don't know, actually, it's a really, really good question.
In New Orleans after Katrina, they put the RVs right on the property where the ruined house was.
This is more, I guess, food for thought, but recently on the news, I was watching a segment where they were talking about, I think it was San Francisco, where all these big commercial buildings are vacant because of work from home. And they're renovating and turning those into housing. And I thought to myself, wow, look at Maple Tree Place and all the commercial, like all the retail space we have that's leaving Williston. And I know we're not zoned correctly for it to become housing, but I thought there's a structure there and there's resources there already in place. Sounds like it would be a nice thing to at least look at. And I'm not sure that's being done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are thinking along those lines. It's expensive to, believe it or not, like it's really different when a building is designed for commercial use versus residential use. But I think that we're exactly where you're suggesting. We really will have to explore that and figure it out.
More expensive than starting from scratch? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Land and all that. But
A few years ago, I had an opportunity to sit with a developer and I said, how come you're not building low income housing? Why don't you build some? Because we know that's needed. And he said, listen, I'll tell you a story. I had a 30 unit single family home development. I got it approved through the state for a couple $100,000 by the time I got done paying my attorneys. Then I went to the town and the town told me I had to have paved roads and sidewalks and curbs and underground services and all these other things. He said I had $750,000 in that development before I put a single house on it. Do you think I can afford to build $150,000 homes? No way. They've got to be expensive homes in order for me to break even. Never mind make a profit.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, it's math. It's math. And it's a pretty big challenge.
That's only one piece of the problem.
Yes.
The development on the golf course up here on Mountain View Road has been in process since 2009, since 2019. And that a builder can make more money by putting their money in the bank and collecting interest than they can by sitting waiting for the permitting process to go through.
Can you describe a little bit more just kind of what your collaborative effort might be with town committees, the people who are formulate policies that will dictate how housing goes?
Sure. I think I jumped right into talking about the data without giving you the background about what Vermont Housing Finance Agency is and what I do there. But Vermont Housing Finance Agency is a statewide agency. There are a couple of us. We have similar names. They all start with like V. We're VHFA, there's a VHCB, there's VSHA. These are all statewide agencies that have a piece of the subsidized housing puzzle And so what we do, we're the financial entity of the group, and we are a lender for the development of affordable rental housing. We allocate state and federal tax credits. And then we also help finance loans for first-time home buyers and low and moderate income people who are looking to buy a home. So we're kind of like a bank for affordable housing, but we have to make decisions about that. It's really important to be informed about the data. And so what we have a research and community relations team at VHFA, and that's where I sit. And so what my team does is we do housing policy research, housing needs research, and we look to work with communities like Williston, where we can, who are starting housing committees or are interested in doing housing needs assessments, because it is so important that the community be on board. Communities hold a lot of they can say yay or nay to housing. And so it's we realized that we could have all the funds in the world, but if we don't work with communities to help them understand who lives there and what their housing stock is, we wouldn't be able to do anything with these funds. And so that's where my work focuses on, actually talking to communities that are looking to move forward with housing committees or housing needs assessments, and then also doing research.
Thank you, Leslie. This was an excellent presentation, and I'm so sorry we didn't have the technology to support you, but you handled it very well. Certainly did. And this is such a critical matter in our state. I was really happy to learn about it. Ted, would you like to?
Yep. So as a way of thanking you, we are going to make a donation to the Williston Central School Mentoring Program in your honor. And we get a home version of the Rotary board. And we ask you to pick the winning numbers from our 50/50 raffle.
Please read the last three digits.
655.
All